everyone, I am Kimberly, the 5-Minute NP. The 5-Minute NP was born out of my belief that small, incremental changes can drastically change the trajectory of your life. Our genes do not have to determine our lifespan. My goal through this podcast is to act as a roadmap that bridges the gap between knowledge and action, leading to you living your healthiest, happiest, longest life. Welcome to the 5-Minute NP podcast. Hello everyone, this episode is awesome with Jen Stevens, author of Fast, Feast, and Repeat, the comprehensive guide to delay, don't deny, intermittent fasting. Jen has led an intermittent fasting lifestyle since 2014. This has changed her whole life, including helping her lose over 80 pounds and keep it off. She has her own intermittent fasting website, 4 online support groups, her own podcast, and 4 self-published books on intermittent fasting. The information she shares about intermittent fasting is for everyone, regardless of where you're at in the practice. She gives the latest research as well as the do's and don'ts associated with it. She says intermittent fasting is a health plan with the side effect of weight loss. Enjoy this episode and welcome to the 5-Minute NP podcast. Hi, Jen. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. So glad to be here today.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear your story and share your book and talk about this topic. It is so popular. I've been looking so forward to talking about this.
Oh yeah, it's really amazing to watch it catch on. You know, I've been an intermittent faster really off and on since 2009 as a lifestyle since 2014, but to really see it pick up steam is just amazing.
Yeah, I know. I started hearing a lot about it, and it's just, I think what you said is so true. And I can't wait to talk about that kind of like the mindset and how different this is from just dieting. But first, I thought we could talk a little bit about what life was like for you before you started this whole process of intermittent fasting. Like, what was your life like?
Well, like so many people who are listening, I'm sure, I was what you might call a serial dieter, meaning that, you know, really from the time that I didn't even need to diet when I was a really slim teenager, but I saw a mother who was already dieting. My mother always was dieting. She was a dance teacher. And so it kind of just became ingrained in me that as women, that's what we do. We diet. And so, you know, I went off to college, gained the freshman 15, and that was the first time I needed to diet a little bit, you know, and I counted calories and dieted that way. And then, you know, I went through the whole schmeal through the decades, right? I did the low fat diet in the 90s. You know, I read every diet book. I did my share of low carb dieting over the years, counting calories. I did anything that you could do, you know, physician aided diet pills, HCG shots. I mean, I was looking for anything that would, you know, get me to whatever my goal weight was and help me to stay there. But I thought of, you know, you were either on a diet or off a diet. That was like the mindset that I had. And so it wasn't until I did a lot of work mentally and figured out, you know, intermittent fasting is a lifestyle. It's not a diet at all. It's not something you start and stop. And it really stopped that cycle of up and down that I had been trapped on.
Mm-hmm. Had you, I think a lot of times I think about, you know, our mindset where, you know, we're just kind of going along living. And at some point we get so fed up, so tired of living a certain way that we're like, that's enough. I'm going to do something today. Did you have that kind of moment where you're like, that's it, I'm changing everything?
Well, I had many of those over the decade, but I couldn't figure out, you know, what to change and what to do. You know, I have a doctorate in gifted education. I'm a, you know, smart person. I was successful in the rest of my life. So why was it so difficult for me to figure out the weight struggle? You know, I have a slim husband who was always slim, never struggled with his weight. He would just say, well, just eat a little bit less, move a little bit more. And I'm like, well, thank you. If only it were that easy. There actually was a period of time that I gave up completely for just a off and on, but more. I was giving up more than I was not giving up through the period of like 2012, 2013, 2014. And I just pretty much resigned myself to the fact that I was going to be overweight or obese the rest of my life. I got up to 210 pounds, in fact, and I'm 5'5", so that was definitely in the obese range for me. But then, we went on a family cruise in 2014, and I got off that cruise ship and I felt so terrible in my body. I looked at the photos from that cruise and I was like, is that really me? Am I that obese, overweight, middle-aged woman? I was in, my upper 40s at that time. And I was like, I had to struggle to climb the steps of the Mayan ruins, for example. The being physically active on the cruise was hard. Everything was uncomfortable. And I thought, you know what? This is not how I want to live the rest of my life. Just, yo-yoing up and down, but mostly up. I'm really tired of that. So I'm going to figure this out. And over the next year from that point forward, I did figure it out. Intermittent fasting became something that I really embraced. And for the first time ever, it stuck. And I hit my goal weight, my initial goal weight in the spring of 2015. At first, I wanted to lose 75 pounds. I went on to lose about 80 pounds overall. And I've maintained that loss since 2015 now. So that's what's so exciting. This is the first time, ever since that freshman home from college with that first diet I really did, ever since then, there's never been a time in my life where I was able to lose weight, keep it off, and stay in the same range like I have, thanks to intermittent fasting. So it's really been remarkable and so much freedom involved with that.
Yeah. So how has intermittent fasting changed you as a person? Like, what has it done for you?
Oh, so many ways. First of all, it's changed my relationship with food completely.
Mm-hmm.
There are no more good foods, bad foods. I'm not looking for a magical diet, like the magical way that I can eat whatever I want. I've found it. I do eat, quote, whatever I want. What's so fascinating is that whatever I want has really changed. The foods that appealed to me when I was obese and the foods that we did a lot of drive-through, we ate at restaurants, I would buy convenience foods. Those foods no longer appeal to me because now that I'm in tune with my body, thanks to intermittent fasting, I crave nutritious foods. I've realized that my body wants nutrients. And so if I, go on a vacation and, just eating out, it's really hard to find high quality food at a lot of restaurants. I get home and I'm like, man, I need some veggies.
Yeah.
And that's just such a change that I never expected. I eat like a grown up, I guess.
Yeah. At any point during this process, did you face any obstacles, have any setbacks?
Well, obstacles and setbacks of my own making, because so much of everything, of adopting an intermittent fasting lifestyle, so much of it is emotional. I talk about this in my most recent book, Fast, Feast, Repeat. I have a mindset chapter that I think is my favorite chapter of the whole book, because until you get your mind in the right place, you can know what to do, you can know why to do it, but until you really commit to it, get your mind right, you're going to have a hard time being successful. And that was a lot of my trouble in those years between 2009 and 2014. I had heard about intermittent fasting. Of course, we didn't understand it back then. I mean, maybe some people did, but none of the books that you read, the older ones, really, it was all just a way to eat fewer calories. Now we understand there's a lot more to it. Hormonally, it's good for our health in many other ways. We can get into that later. But it just seemed like something you do for a short time. And instead of realizing, first of all, it's a lifestyle, but also it's not deprivation. And that was the biggest mindset shift that I had to make. Like, for example, we're recording right now, it's in just afternoon and my window is still closed, meaning I haven't had anything to eat today. I'll eat later this afternoon. And early on, when I was really struggling, I was like, I can't eat. I can't have breakfast. I can't, go to lunch because I have to do this fasting thing. Instead, I've shifted my thinking. And instead of, living my life for the time that I get to eat, I fully embrace that in the fasted state, that I think the magic happens during the clean fast. My body has a chance to heal and repair and tap into any fat stores that it needs to tap into. And that's where the health benefits are, during the clean fast. So I've learned to appreciate the fast every bit as I appreciate, the eating window.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of approaching it with the mindset of deprivation, like, well, I can't have that now, I think of it as I can have what I would like to have later, whatever sounds good to me, whatever makes my body feel good. It's just, my first book was called Delay, Don't Deny. And really having that mindset shift helped a lot. I delay, I don't deny.
And I think I cannot agree more. It is so much like with anything. Mindset is huge. And
So
yeah,
huge.
You're right. I love that chapter. I can't wait to share more about your book. I think what I loved about your book is, yes, you give some great scientific stuff, which is awesome. I love that part. But really, you really simplify it and make it easy to understand. And you just kind of work through it. It's kind of like great for like a resource. You could just keep going back to it. What can I have? And I think you're right. It's a total mindset shift. And I want to talk more about the benefits of fasting to begin with before we jump ahead. So why should people fast in the first place?
Well, I think that's a great question. And, I came to it for weight loss, I have to admit, and a lot of people do. But I like to call it, now that I understand it better, I like to call it the health plan with the side effect of weight loss, because that's really at the root of it all, what intermittent fasting is. If your only goal is, I want to lose some pounds, that's all the reason I'm doing this, then you're going to miss out on really the mindset shift that you need to have. So I want everyone to, first of all, think about this as the best health and longevity hack, if you will, out there. Intermittent fasting. It's simple. Have a period of the day where you're not eating, you're getting into the fasted state, and then later you nourish your body during the feast. And really, I think that shift, the whole idea of intermittent fasting being a healthy way to live, really came to the forefront of so many people, or to so many people, in December of 2019. And that was when Dr. Mark Mattson had a fabulous review article in the New England Journal of Medicine. Did you see that one when it came out? Look it up. It's in the December 24th New England Journal of Medicine, and it's a review article of the health benefits of intermittent fasting, of all the literature that's out there. And what's really, yeah, well, and I didn't talk about it in Fast, Feast, Repeat because my book I'd already finished writing it. So it was too late to put that in there. But I have another Mark Mattson article in there, but not the one that came out in 2019. But what was so exciting about that article coming out, first of all, the history of why he wrote it. From what I understand, the New England Journal of Medicine asked him to write it because so many doctors were asking about fasting. Like patients were coming in and saying, I'm doing intermittent fasting, but the doctors didn't really know. A lot of them didn't know about it. And so they wanted to, to have this resource available. So the New England Journal of Medicine asked him to write this article, for the demand of the doctors who wanted to read about it. So that's exciting right there. Because I really think it's been a grassroots movement from people finding it, telling others about it, and then bringing it to their doctors, who then look into it and say, oh, wait, this is really backed by good, solid science. It's a healthy way to live. The other thing that really excited me right after that article came out is that people, I have some very large Facebook support communities. People were joining the communities, and we asked them why are you interested in intermittent fasting? And people started to say, for the health benefits. And so, I really believe, there's a saying, so many people think that you have to lose weight to get healthy, but I actually believe you have to get healthy to lose weight. And they go together. And so intermittent fasting helps you to get healthy, and then you can lose the weight that you need to lose.
So it helps with, I was reading through there and just the benefits, heart health, brain health,
yes,
decreasing inflammation, cancer prevention, diabetes. I mean, you even talk about it in your book, how people have actually reversed diabetes. I mean, that's huge.
It is huge. And just in my community, we have all sorts of people that, they'll share their A1C numbers, for example. They were fully in the diabetic range, and over the course of the months and the years that they've been doing intermittent fasting, now they're They have a normal A1C, which is amazing. Dr. Mark Mattson, who I talked about before, that wrote the article in the New England Journal of Medicine, he was a Johns Hopkins researcher, and he studies brain health. So, he looks at how it helps us, prevent Alzheimer's and, just have a youthful brain, which is very exciting. I want my brain to age well. Yeah. But, one thing I love that when you see these researchers who are researching it, they all live the lifestyle too. Not only do they study it, but they're so convinced that it's a healthy way to live that they adopt it for themselves. And I think that's pretty compelling when the top researchers are doing it. That I'm going to do what they're doing.
Right, exactly. I want to talk about insulin.
Okay.
Because, when people think of insulin, what do they think of? They think of diabetes.
Right.
So
and injecting it.
Yeah. And, I started to even, I went through school and all this good stuff, and still I didn't really think much about, well, yeah, you're eating all day long. You're having insulin all day long and you're gaining weight, it's like I kind of didn't put it all together, embarrassingly to say, until I read the Obesity Code.
Right.
And I read that book, not because I'm obese, but because I wanted to have a better understanding of it so that I could help others understand it, because it's huge. And once you kind of understand it, like I want you to kind of explain, you kind of realize this is why I shouldn't be doing this. And it kind of clicks. So I would love it if you would kind of talk about how insulin works for us, works against us, and kind of helps us. It can be detrimental to our health if we have too much.
Right. And that's the key, because sometimes people get confused with insulin and they think, oh, insulin's bad. We don't want it. No.
Yeah.
We have to have it
to live. But
we need insulin. Insulin is not bad. What is bad is hyperinsulinemia. High levels of insulin all the time. And I have it linked in Fast Feast Repeat in the resources section, but I read an article, a medical journal article about hyperinsulinemia and how many of the health conditions that this is really linked to. I didn't really even realize that till I was doing this research. We all know that insulin is important in diabetes. We know that's just, we've heard of that connection, but hyperinsulinemia is related to, for example, Alzheimer's. I'm sure you've heard Alzheimer's is often referred to now as type 3 diabetes, because it has to do with high levels of insulin in the brain, and that's not good. To have high levels of insulin, just not good for us in so many ways. So many people now, women, are being diagnosed with PCOS, polycystic ovary disease, and that's related to high levels of insulin. So I genuinely believe if we have really high levels of insulin all the time, it's going to cause some kind of problem. Maybe it's obesity for you. Maybe it's type 2 diabetes. Maybe it's Alzheimer's. Maybe it's PCOS. Maybe it's increased inflammation. But getting our levels of insulin down, and I also learned about that from the Obesity Code. That's where I had so many of my aha moments. That's really key. So why do we have this hyperinsulinemia all of a sudden? And that's so very interesting. And it's, why do we release insulin? Why does our pancreas release insulin? Well, it's in response to, to simplify it, and our blood glucose. If your blood glucose is high, you need insulin to bring that down. Insulin is the storage hormone. The problem is we are constantly signaling our pancreas that we need more insulin. How are we doing that? So many of us are not eating all the time, but we are drinking things that tells our brain to release the insulin. I think back to when I was obese, and really, even though I struggled with my weight for all those years, it wasn't until I started drinking, lattes all day long and always had a diet soda in my hand, right? All the time. So I was constantly sending the signal to my body that something sweet was coming in. Even if it was a 0-calorie diet soda, my brain tasted the sweetness from my tongue. And so sent the signal to my pancreas, we've got something sweet coming in. We're going to have blood glucose going up. We better release some insulin. Well, then of course my brain didn't understand that's a diet soda. There's no real glucose coming in. But in the meantime, it confuses our bodies. So, go to Costco or your big box store and look around the beverage aisle and see, there are hundreds of beverage options, at every gas station, everywhere you go, every vending machine. They're all flavored, they're sweetened, and we are like nursing them all day long. I think back to myself, I really always had something flavored or sweetened within arm's reach all the time. And so I was constantly telling my body that I needed more insulin. And so what does that give you? That gives you insulin resistance over time. And anyone who has abdominal obesity, which I started to develop, I had a really big belly and I'm pretty sure that's why, it's a sign of insulin resistance.
Yeah. I like in the book how you actually talk about insulin being anti-fat burning.
Right.
And once you understand that it's against fat burning, you understand why you don't want to be releasing it all day long.
Exactly. And you understand why you're so hungry when you're trying to do those low calorie diets where you're eating all day, because insulin keeps your body from really tapping into fat stores. It's a storage hormone. So when you have really high levels of insulin, you're in storing mode. So now you're trying to do a low calorie diet, eating 6 small meals a day, like we've been told to do, with your diet soda in your hand, and you're counting your calories, but you're starving and you're so hungry, and you really, really are, because your body can't tap into your fat stores well. And so then your body sends you the signal, eat, 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 because you are literally starving, and then it lowers your metabolism, and it's a vicious cycle. But you're following the advice, you're doing what you think is the right thing to do, and you're getting bigger and bigger. And I was trapped in that for so many years.
Yeah, I love how you even talked about how, and so many people do this, you are forcing yourself to eat breakfast, you're forcing yourself to have snacks thinking you need it, when really you're better off not doing it.
Yeah, you got those snacks already stored there. You ate them in the past, and that's what they're there for. They're on your body to be used as fuel, but you can't access that fuel. And so you're really, really hungry. And so that's what the clean fast and intermittent fasting does for you. It basically, it allows you to lower your insulin over time. So then your body can look around and see, well, I'm not in storage mode anymore. I'm in the fasted state. My insulin is down. Oh, look, there's a lot of fuel on my body. I can tap into that. And then you're well fueled. You don't have that hungry feeling, and you feel great from all that energy that you've got right there. That's what it's for.
I think you talk about this in your book, and I think it is important for people to realize that this is a process. It's not just like you're not going to get rich overnight. You're not going to drop all this weight overnight. But it is a process, and that you talk about, you actually, you may start intermittent fasting and you may not see results right away. It takes time, right, for your body to kind of go through those glycogen stores and get to that point where it does start burning fat for fuel, right?
It's true. And really, you have to think about, a lot of it has to do with how long you've been struggling. If you've been overweight or obese for a long period of time, your body has a lot more healing to do. If everybody could get their fasting insulin levels, that's not a test that is common. And a lot of people go and ask their doctor, can I have a fasted insulin test? And the doctor's like, you mean your blood glucose test? And they're like, no. They have to explain why they want a fasting insulin test. But get a fasted insulin test if you can talk your doctor into it, and see. I had one recently, and it was below 5, which is very low, and that's good. Anything below 8 is better than something obviously higher. But as you start getting to 8 and above, it might be, quote, normal. But if you start getting into the teens and beyond that, you've got a lot of insulin. And so you really are going to need to bring that down over time. And so somebody who starts intermittent fasting and might have really high insulin levels on day 1, because your body's just been releasing insulin for all this time, more and more and more, and you have insulin resistance, it's going to take time to reverse that.
Yeah, I thought that was really important for people to realize that this is a process.
It is.
I found it interesting, and I thought you could touch on this a little bit. Why do we gain so much energy and mental clarity with intermittent fasting?
That's the beauty of it. And it's ketosis for one thing. We get into ketosis during the fast, and that confuses a lot of people who have never read about intermittent fasting, but they've heard of, the keto diet. They might have a friend who's done the keto diet, or maybe a friend who was selling, a ketone drink, so they think of ketones and ketosis as having to do with the low carb paradigm. But basically, ketosis is when our body is burning fat for fuel. So you can do that by taking in fat, like the keto diet, or you're eating a very high fat diet. And so your body takes the fat you're eating and turns that into ketones to fuel your brain. Or you can do that through intermittent fasting, where you're fasting and your body has to tap into your own stored fat for fuel and turns those into ketones for your brain, because our brain loves to run on ketones. And that's what gives you that great mental clarity and so much energy during the fasted state, because your body is well fueled. It's your brain. It's, great energy for your brain, but you're getting it from internal stores versus something that you're taking in.
Right. I thought that was great, because you talk about, and I kind of have it down further in my question line, but I thought you mentioned like not adding the MCT oil and whatever else as external sources, because then your body is, breaking down that, right, as opposed to its own source. So it's better to not add that to your stuff in the morning, right?
Our body, our goal is not to have high levels of ketones. Our goal is to make ketones from our stored fat. So, you could get, it's kind of like the analogy of, if I sprayed myself down with somebody else's sweat and then thought that I worked out, I didn't. I had somebody else's sweat. They did the work. I'm just spraying it on myself. Right. So I don't want to do that. I don't want to take in exogenous ketones that your friend is selling you because it will get you into ketosis. No, it gives you ketones because you drank them or something. And you don't want to make ketones from a coffee mug full of MCT oil. You want to make it from that extra fat that you have on your belly or on your thighs. And that the process of ketosis from our stored body fat is what we want.
Right. I thought that was a great thing to kind of differentiate, because I know that's really popular. And I thought that was great that you talked about that. It's good information. Well, let's talk about what you talk about in your book about the 3 goals of fasting.
Okay, so we have 3 goals, and we've just talked about insulin, and that's number 1. We want to keep our insulin down so that we can tap into our stored fat. So how do we do that? How do we keep our insulin down? Well, we do not ingest anything that is food, has a food flavor, or that makes our brain think food is coming in. So we stick to just plain water, black coffee, plain tea, sparkling water, no flavor, that's fine too. But we want to avoid the sweetness. You don't want to put cucumber in your water or lemon in your water. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be chewing gum with, the sweeteners added. So avoid anything that tastes sweet. And some people get confused because they're like, well, okay, so we're avoiding flavor. Well, then why can we have coffee and why can we have tea? Because they have a flavor. They're like, I gotcha. This has flavor. Right. Well, those have a bitter flavor. And so in our brains, when we taste, a bitter flavor, that does not send the signal to our pancreas that we need to release insulin in response. So that's why black coffee and plain tea are okay. Herbal teas are really tricky because there's so many out there that are not really tea, and they may have a food flavor or a sweet flavor. Avoid all of those. Plain tea, actual tea, that's fine, but avoid all those fruity, flavory ones. Like I used to drink apple cinnamon delight or something. No, that would not be part of the fast. So we want to keep our insulin low by avoiding anything that is sweet or food flavored or actually food. The second fasting goal is to tap into our fat stores for fuel. And so we avoid taking any source of energy. That would be, don't put butter in your coffee, no matter what diet book you read that says that's a great kind of fasting coffee. It isn't. Don't take in exogenous ketones. Don't put MCT oil in your coffee either. Don't take shots of MCT oil. That's a fuel source. So avoid putting in fuel sources so that you're forced to tap into your own fuel source. And fasting goal 3 is that we want to have increased autophagy. And I don't think I've said the word autophagy yet today to you. Autophagy is something that really came to our attention, in the world of intermittent fasting in 2016, because that was the year that the Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded to a researcher who researches autophagy. What is autophagy? Well, it's our body's cellular housekeeping system. It's like upcycling or recycling, and our body can dig in while we're in the fasted state. We're rummaging around to see what's there. We're tapping into fat stores, we're having ketosis, but also our body is tearing down old junky things, rummaging around and doing that recycling. So pulling out those old junky proteins, those old junky cell parts, and making something new out of them. We have a lot of protein that gets recycled in our bodies. So to keep autophagy going strong, which is very linked to health and longevity, a lot of the problems of aging have to do with the fact that people have, decreased autophagy. So we want to upregulate it. So we avoid taking in any kind of protein during the fast. That's the fasting goal 3. So that means, if you hear about a bone broth fast or something, that's not what we're doing. Bone broth has protein. So avoid any kind of protein during the fast.
That autophagy, I really started looking into that this past year, and it's amazing.
It really is.
Health benefits. But there's also, I was even getting confused with, okay, you have to fast this amount of time for this to ever kick in. Right. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that is good information and bad information at the same time, because, you'll see some information that says you must fast for 36 hours before you experience increased autophagy. Yeah. Well, I think that might be true if you're starting from baseline. Okay. So think about that. Also, someone who's starting from baseline that's never fasted before isn't going to get into ketosis right away either. You have to build up to that. So I think if someone has never done intermittent fasting and you're on day 1 and you're starting, you might not even get there by 36. It might take longer. So am I saying everyone needs to do really long fasts? No. The key is, though, with a daily intermittent fasting practice, like I do, I don't fast longer than, I don't fast over 2 overnight periods. I don't need to. I eat every day. So I'm not doing 36-hour fasts or beyond. And I'm confident that I am experiencing increased autophagy. Well, it has to do with when your body flips that metabolic switch. And it has to do with when you lower the glycogen levels in your liver sufficiently that your body enters that fasted state and has to, start tapping into fat stores for fuel. When you're in that fasted state, that's also when autophagy ramps up. I saw a rat study that was talking about autophagy, and they estimated that really kicked in at around hour 12. But it had to do with the depletion of liver glycogen. So with intermittent fasting, think about it like a big water tank. And every day during the fast, you let out a little bit of water of that water tank. And then during your eating window, you put some back in, but not as much as you took out. So then every day that level goes down a little bit more, and then it goes up, but not as much. So eventually you've drained out enough water out of that water tank, or glycogen out of your liver glycogen stores, that your body has to start tapping into stored fat for fuel. That's when you start getting into ketosis. And from what I've read, I believe that is when we experience the increased autophagy as well. So if you're starting on day 1, you're probably not going to have any increased autophagy for a while. But as you build up that fasting muscle, your body's going to learn how to do all of that. And I don't believe that our body would have this amazing self-cleaning mechanism and then require us to fast for, 36, 48 hours, because in the real, history of mankind, were people purposefully going without food for 36 hours?
Right.
No, they ate when food was available. And so our body wouldn't have an amazing self-cleaning mechanism and then require that you fast, for days and days to experience it.
Well, there's also things that facilitate it. Like you talk in the book that Coffee, you said, facilitates autophagy. Tea and exercise.
Right. Right.
Those are ways to even facilitate it.
It's not like a light switch that's on and off also. Yeah. It's more of like a dimmer switch. You know, the process is upregulated and downregulated. And so it's something that our bodies do. We all, even someone who's not fasting experiences autophagy in their bodies, but we want to have increased levels. Mm-hmm. And we get to that through the fasting.
It's amazing. Just when people start to look into that a little more, you'll talk. I mean, I think you mentioned it about the recycling of skin. I mean, it's just an amazing process that everybody should try to learn more about.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about just something a little common, probably, that you hear a lot. Does fasting cause muscle mass loss?
Well, it over time, no. You've got to let your body adjust. At first, when you're not well fueled, let's say you've got really high insulin levels and you're not tapping into your fat stores efficiently, you're during the adjustment phase, it is possible that you might tap into some muscle loss at that point. But eventually, as your body becomes skilled with fasting and your body learns how to make that shift, think about it. Jason Fung has a beautiful analogy for that. Let's imagine it's cold and your power's out and you need to start a fire. Are you going to chop up your sofa and burn that? Or are you going to use the logs that you stored for just that purpose? And so our bodies are not stupid, as Jason Fung always says. We're not going to burn up valuable muscle tissue when we have fat stored in our body for the purpose of providing fuel to us. Mm-hmm. So the only time that you would have the problem is if you couldn't access that stored fuel on your body. Mm-hmm. And with the clean fast, you do start tapping into that stored fat. And so that's what it's there for. Mm-hmm. Your body is not going to use muscle mass when it can access the stored fat. But that's also why the clean fast is so important, because you want to bring your insulin down so that you can tap into your stored fat. That's the key. I think if someone were, not fasting clean, not keeping their insulin down, they would have to worry maybe a little more about what fuel they're burning during the fast. But if your insulin is low because you're fasting clean and you've got plenty of fat on your body, you're going to tap into that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talked about before yo-yo dieting, and you hear this a lot, I lost all this weight through the keto diet, I did all these great things, and now I hear it all the time, I've gained all my weight back. Mm-hmm. Why? In the book, you kind of talk about our bodies have a set point, and I thought you could touch on that a little bit. Is that what you mean? Is that why people kind of get back to that point?
Well, it depends on why did they gain the weight back? All right. So if you're doing it through a food change, like for example, you mentioned the keto diet. Let's say someone does the keto diet and they lose a lot of weight and then they stop the keto diet and then they gain it back because they went back to the way they were eating before. That makes sense. That's what I always did through the years when I would change what I was eating. Like when I did the low fat diet in the 90s, or low carb, whenever I tried that, or I'm trying to eat clean or whatever I was doing. As soon as I went back to eating normally, the weight came back. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing about all those diet plans where you're changing what you eat. As soon as you go back to your old ways, you're going to get what you had before. But with intermittent fasting, it's very different because you choose whatever foods work for your body during your eating window. So maybe you're someone who doesn't do well with certain carbs. You realize that. And so you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to eat less of that over time. Mm-hmm. And you choose the foods that work well for you, but you don't stop doing intermittent fasting. So you don't gain the weight back. Now with low calorie dieting, on the flip side of that, without intermittent fasting, we've all done that over the years. We've all tried the low calorie dieting where we're eating frequently during the day. And we talked about how your insulin stays high, especially if you're eating little bits of food and you're drinking those diet sodas, your insulin's high, you're not well fueled. Well, that's when we know from research, for example, the Minnesota starvation experiment, which was a great study done in the middle of the 1900s, it had to do with how our bodies slow our metabolic rate in response to prolonged fuel deprivation. So their metabolism slowed down. It's your body trying to protect you. And so then you have the increased urge to binge, and that's exactly what they saw. And anyone who's done a low calorie diet for a long period of time has probably felt that. You're just like, I'm starving. And then you start overeating and you're like, what's wrong with me? Why am I so weak? And it's not you. It's the biology of what's happened in your body with all of that restriction. It's your body fighting back and wanting to protect you, because the low calorie diet is really starving you. And the difference with fasting is we are well fueled during the fast because we have the fuel on our bodies that we're able to tap into. So that's the real difference. You feel so good while you're fasting. You're well fueled. You have the mental clarity. Your body doesn't feel like you're starving. So you're not getting the signal, that you need to binge. And, you experience what Dr. Burt Herring coined the phrase appetite correction. And that's when you feel in your eating window, like you've had enough to eat, you're satisfied, you don't need to keep eating and eating. You're in that point where you're in balance with how much food you should be eating.
So with the metabolism, it actually increases when you short-term fast, right? As opposed, I thought I was like you were mentioning it, the longer you fast, it actually slows, right?
Well, that's an interesting, we don't have data with real extended fasting that I'm aware of. I haven't seen a study on that, but there's a great study that I think is very instructive. And I refer to it in Fast, Feast, Repeat. And they did a study with people and they fasted them for 72 hours. So they measured their metabolic rate before they started. So they had a baseline metabolic rate level. And then as they were going through the fast, metabolic rate went up. And it kept going up. But then at a certain point in the fast, it started to go back down again. So by the time they got to hour 72, the metabolic rate was on a downward trajectory. Now, it was still higher than it had been at baseline. So metabolic rate went up and then it started to go down and it was on that downward trajectory. So what does that tell us? That tells us that eventually your body is going to perceive that nothing is coming in and it wants to protect you, even though you do have that, the fat stored on your body, your body's like, oh, nothing's coming in. I do need to slow down a little bit. So at what point does that happen? Well, I have a hunch it's probably a different point for different people, but eventually if you don't eat, your body is going to protect you and slow your metabolism down. But based on that information from that one study, we can see that those participants did see increased metabolism during the early parts of the fast. So I think that that's really instructive, and it can keep us from thinking, well, if a little fasting is good, then I'm just going to fast for weeks. Right. I wouldn't do that. Dr. Joel Fuhrman has a book about fasting that he wrote a long time ago. I'm not really sure. It was one of the first books on fasting that I had. And he talks about with his patients that he would work with, he would have them do really long fasts under his supervision. And he said, yes, your metabolism will be slower at the end with these really long fasts. And you have to know that that's going to happen. So, there is a danger with extended fasting, but that's not my realm. I'm not an extended faster, and I'm not encouraging people to do extended fasting. I think if you want to do, every now and then, a longer fast, but anything over 72 hours, I would really encourage you to do under a doctor's supervision and know that too much fasting for your body is going to have metabolic consequences. Even though intermittent fasting is amazing, it doesn't completely 100% protect you if you're also over restricting. Because the key is when your body feels that you are over restricting and it's not well fueled, that's when your body is going to put protective measures in place to protect you. And the point where your body is worried about it and my body might be two different points.
Yeah. Is there a difference with fasting for men and women?
But there's a lot of debate about that. And I really, again, a woman's body, well, really all humans, all of our bodies don't respond well to prolonged over restriction over time. That's not good for us as humans, men or women. Women, we are sensitive hormonally because, our bodies are designed to reproduce and grow a baby. So we know with whether it's fasting or any kind of, weight loss or diet protocol that you're following, if you over restrict, it will affect your body negatively as a woman. It's not good for us to over restrict. But the key about intermittent fasting is that you don't want it to become overly restrictive. You want to be well fueled. My book is not called Fast, Diet, Repeat. Right. It's called Fast, Feast, Repeat. So we want you to live a lifestyle where you are fasting clean, and then you fuel yourself well with nutritious foods during your eating window. And then you keep repeating that. So our bodies are not designed for prolonged over restriction. So we don't want to get caught up in that. Sometimes it's a phrase that I mention in Fast, Feast, Repeat. I call it the fasting Olympics. We think that if a little bit is good, a lot is going to be better. And so especially women who have lived their life as dieters, they may be afraid to sit down and enjoy a satisfying and filling meal. So if you're fasting and then approaching your eating window as a restrictive diet, that would not be recommended. Also, I don't want you to overeat. There's a balance. You need to learn to get, you want to eat well, nourish your body. You don't want to overeat, but you don't want to undereat. But the beauty of it is your body will let you know.
I was going to ask you, can you eat anything you want during that time window? It's kind of like, okay, I fasted. Now it's a free for all.
Yeah, it's not, we don't want you to have a free for all, and I actually, in the book, I examine the words, eat whatever you want. And it's really all about emphasis. So much of intermittent fasting is sold to you as eat whatever you want, right? Like you're a college freshman turned loose with a meal plan and your mom's not watching. You can get as many desserts as you want, eat whatever you want.
Right.
But that is not what we recommend for intermittent fasting. Although we do say, eat whatever you want. Same words, different emphasis. Eat whatever you want, but don't eat whatever you want. You can lose weight with intermittent fasting with any foods, but you can't do it if you're overeating. Any foods. I mean, if you're overeating, that's not going to be a great weight loss strategy. So intermittent fasting is not an excuse to fast and then gorge. We want to eat well, we want to eat till we're satisfied, and then we stop. Overeating is not the strategy we want to encourage.
How does the fasting help our hormones?
Oh, so many ways. Insulin's a hormone for one thing.
Yeah.
And, it does so many things. It gets us back into balance in so many ways. And it just really depends. That's a very broad question. It helps.
Well, the human growth hormone,
right,
is associated with longevity, right? And so I think I was reading it increases that.
It does.
Which is awesome.
Yep. Fasting has been linked to increased human growth hormone, which means that we're better able to build muscle, because we've heard of bodybuilders taking human growth hormone supplements in order to build muscle easier. But for fasting, we have the increased human growth hormone that happens naturally. So that also helps us to not burn the muscle, right? We have the high levels of human growth hormone. So we're able to build muscle easier just by living our everyday lives. When is the point in our lives naturally when human growth hormone is at the highest levels? Well, it's when we're babies, and toddlers. We have higher levels of human growth hormone, and babies and toddlers are building lots of muscle, but they're not, going to the gym.
Right.
Rolling over.
Right.
And so our bodies are designed to, in the presence of excess human growth hormone, we're designed to grow muscle well. So just living your life, you'll preserve that muscle and even build some muscle if you're doing some activities.
Is there a point that you kind of know, like, I'm in the fat burning stage now, I'm in ketosis now? I mean, at what point do you know you're kind of there?
Well, I know the signs. I can feel it. And for people who are just starting out, once you start to, have increased energy during the fast, as you go later into the day, like when I pass noon and start getting to 1 or 2 o'clock, that's when my energy levels are really at their highest in that early afternoon. Cause I can tell them, I'm making ketones. I can tell on my breath as well. Like I know the signs, I know, what it feels like for me. But if you have increased mental clarity during the day as you're fasting and good solid energy, that's a sign that you're tapping into your fat stores for fuel. And a lot of times people will struggle because you'll be a little hungry and then they're like, well, I just can't make it. And so then every day they get to that hungry point and then they eat. Well, they're never quite going past that moment because your body's never having to make that push. So early on, as your body's adjusting, you may have to push through here and there at the beginning until you get to the other side. Because if you always stop before you get to the other side, you may not ever get there.
Right. Let me see. I was going to ask you one more thing about it. Oh, do you do the same thing? I think you were reading, and I thought it was important to mention it's okay to change up your time windows, and it's actually beneficial as far as your protocol you're following, right?
Definitely. Our bodies like homeostasis. We like to stay the same. So if you get into the rut of eating exactly the same thing every day, exactly the same time, your body is more likely to adapt to something that is exactly the same day in and day out. Fortunately for me, I've always really shaken it up. I haven't gotten into the rut of, the same exact window, the same exact food. Some days I eat more, some days I eat less. And I think that really helps. There's a pattern of fasting, alternate daily fasting, or the up and the down day approach that is well researched. And, I talk about it in Fast, Feast, Repeat. And it's almost like, I don't encourage people to count calories because that's such flawed science overall. Our bodies don't work like calorie calculators, but the up down day method or alternate daily fasting is kind of like a calorie cycling protocol where you eat less one day and then more the next day, the down days and the up days. And that really is good for keeping that metabolism guessing. You don't have that, you don't adjust to it because it's up and it's down.
Well, you do a great job in your book on talking about all the different protocols, and you do a great job even like break it down, like if you're going to follow this one or do one, each, it's awesome information. And I think that you mentioned that it's so important. And what's so cool about this is it's very empowering. You are in control. It's very individual.
I think that's really important. And as I mentioned before, you learn the foods that work for you, but it might not be the same foods that work for me. And the fasting time that works best for me might not be the fasting time that works best for you. We're all very much a study of one. And so you're empowered. That's the word that I really want people to leave after reading my book, leave it with that idea that you're in charge. And from the very first page, I want people to be able to craft an intermittent fasting plan and eating plan that works for you. And that you're in control at all times. I have a chapter, there is no wagon to fall off of. It's just a learning experience. Some days you'll have a longer window and some days you'll have a shorter window. And if you go on vacation and take a day off or a week off, you're not failing. It's just, that's an experience in your life. And then you fast and then you feast and it's okay. And you're in charge at all times. You understand what goes on behind the scenes. If you know why we fast, then you're happy to get back to it. It doesn't feel punitive because your mind is in the right place. And so, you're not punishing yourself. You're not responding to overeating by fasting more. Instead, you fast because it feels good and you eat because it feels good.
Speaking of falling off the wagon, say you have a little creamer in your coffee. Should you give up on the fast for that day?
Well, you are not fasting. So that's
the thing. Cheat that morning.
There's no cheating. You can't cheat your body, right? So there is no cheating. It's just you're fasting or you're not. So let's say you wake up and you're having creamer in your coffee. You are now in the fed state because you're taking in fuel for your body. So you're now low calorie dieting, really.
Okay.
If you just are having coffee creamer all morning, you're keeping your insulin up, you're not tapping into your fat stores, and you're going to have all of the same responses that you would have from a low calorie diet. So just consider that, if you're having coffee with creamer, your window is open, and don't say, oh, I'm failing. Well, no, you're just not fasting. You're either fasting clean or you're not fasting. And so if you want the benefits from the fast, you do have to fast. And I want you to fast clean. And once you understand why, again, you understand why we drink our coffee black, why it's important, you wouldn't want to risk losing those benefits over coffee with creamer. You can have that in your eating window if you want. You can have decaf with creamer after dinner at night, and it won't affect your sleep. You just delay it. Have your coffee the way you want it once your window is open. We're not asking you to give up anything you love. You just need to recognize, well, if I'm fasting, I'm fasting, and know why.
Right. So maybe drink the green tea and all that other stuff.
Yeah, you're empowered to make your choice at any time. But if you choose to fast, make sure you really are fasting, or else you're really just fooling yourself. You're on a low calorie coffee creamer diet. Can you lose weight on the low calorie coffee creamer diet? Probably. But then you're also going to, slow your metabolic rate. You'll have all the problems that come along with low calorie dieting.
Okay. Also, you do mention, I thought was in the kind of the questions, which a lot of people take a fiber supplement and they do it at night. So that's also really breaking your fast.
Well, if you take something at night, it depends on when your eating window is.
Okay.
For example, let's say that I finish eating my dinner at 7 p.m. and I close my window, but that doesn't mean that right at that moment, my body pops into the fasted state. It's a process. My body is digesting my dinner. My body's working through that. It's going through my digestive system. It takes time. There's that dimmer switch again. My body is making the transition from the fed state to the fasted state. So if at 9 p.m., as I'm going to bed, I toss back a fiber capsule, that's probably not going to have a big effect because I'm still making the transition from fed state to fasted state. Now, if I wake up in the morning and it's been 12 hours since I ate, you can see I'm farther along. I'm probably in the fasted state. That's not when I want to pop something in. Okay. Because that would interrupt the processes of the fast that I'm getting into. But you just really have to think about that timing. So medications at bedtime are a little bit different if you have an evening eating window, because you're probably not far enough in the fast for it to ruin everything, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. Because I was wondering about that. And I think that's why you say you do typically the one meal a day, but it's not all at the same time. You kind of have a little area. I thought that was good information too, because you think, oh my goodness, sometimes when you think about it, you're like, oh, really? Because part of the joy of life is eating.
Right. I love to eat.
Exactly. So it's not, so I felt like you really did a great job explaining. It's like, no, I still have this, or I still have that. I love that. Is it best to exercise, or is it optimal to exercise in the fasted state?
I think the answer to that is yes, that exercising in the fasted state, once your body adjusts. Now, if you're in the beginning and you're trying to adjust to fasting, that would not be the time to think you're going to go also run a marathon, because your body is not going to be well fueled and it will be very difficult. So let your body adjust to fasting. But for me, I have way better energy when I'm in the fasted state. We moved a year and a half ago into a new house, and I did all the box packing and the box moving and all of that while I was fasted. And I had so much stamina and endurance during the fasted state. And then I would wait till I was, done for the day, and then I would eat. And then I'd be too tired to do any more work after the eating. Yeah. But so ideally, yes, you're going to get your great workouts in during the fasted state. Now, one caveat, I don't want you to use that as an excuse not to exercise when it's convenient for you. So if you're somebody that, the time for your exercise is, you want to do something at 7 p.m. because that's the time of the day when you have it available, it's okay to exercise in the fed state as well. So don't, not do it just because of the timing.
That's good information because yeah, you're right. It's like, no, exercise is good for you no matter what.
Anytime. Exactly.
Anytime.
Go for a walk after dinner, and that's okay. Like, darn, I didn't go for a walk in the fasted state. I guess I'm not going to do it. No, go for the walk if you want to.
Actually, it helps your body if you have eaten. It helps your body if you get up and move after you eat. It helps your insulin. It helps your sugar regulation better as well.
That's why I hesitate to say best, because the best time to exercise is the time that you can fit it into your day.
Yeah, that's true. Who should not fast?
That's a great question. You should not fast if you're pregnant. You should not fast if you're breastfeeding, and you should not fast if you have an eating disorder, you've been treated for an eating disorder. You should not fast on your own. I'm not going to tell you not to fast, but don't do it on your own. Work with your counselor. We've had a lot of people who struggled with perhaps binge eating disorder or something like that. And they found intermittent fasting actually calmed it down to the point that now they don't have that problem anymore. But you have to be cautious. So you want to have a counselor, kind of there supporting you that understands intermittent fasting and your specific eating disorder issues. So I don't want to say never, 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 but do that with professional help. But pregnant and breastfeeding, never, never, never. But eating disorder, have some help along the way. Also, children and teens that are still developing physically, that would not be the time to put someone on an intermittent fasting protocol. You may have a teenager who doesn't want to eat breakfast in the morning. They feel better without breakfast. Don't ever force them to eat, but don't say, hey, you're doing intermittent fasting. Let the teen, eat when they're hungry, when it's right for them. Because, we don't want to restrict while they're growing.
Right. That's true. What about diabetics? I was kind of reading that the 5-2 method is actually good for diabetics, but is that what you've read too?
Really, all the methods are good for diabetics as long as you are really, watching what's happening. We actually see something that surprises people, because we talked about how A1C goes down over time. At the very beginning, you may see blood glucose actually higher during the fast. And that scares people because they're like, well, I just started fasting and now my blood glucose in the fasted state is higher than it was. Help. What's wrong? Why am I getting worse? And Dr. Fung has a wonderful blog post about that. And he explains that what's happening is, when you understand physiologically, you've got all this glycogen stored. You've got it stored all over the place, but a lot of it's stored in your liver. So when you're fasting, what's your liver going to do? It's going to empty out that stored glycogen. And where's the glycogen going to go? It's going to go into your bloodstream. So he says it's taking the blood glucose that was, or the glucose that was already stored in your body where it was hidden, but now you see it because it's in your blood. So it's not like, brand new blood glucose you never had or brand new glucose. It's just now you see it, it's in your blood. So that's part of the process. You want to clear out your liver glycogen over time, but you do have to watch and make sure you're not having dangerously high blood glucose levels. And that's why you need to work with your doctor. Ideally, you would have an endocrinologist or a physician who understands intermittent fasting, the long-term benefits, and how to get you there. You want to have a plan for managing your blood glucose highs and lows. What do you need to do? When do you time your medicine? How do you time that around the fast? And so, don't ask me how to time it. Talk to your doctor about it because they're the ones that can tell you what to do for your unique situation. But, there are endocrinologists out there who are prescribing intermittent fasting to their patients as a therapeutic approach. Dr. Jason Fung wrote a book, The Diabetes Code. Did you read The Diabetes Code?
I just read the other one.
Well, if you know anyone who is diabetic or anyone who's listening who is diabetic, I would start with the Diabetes Code. First read Fast, Feast, or Feed, then read the Diabetes Code to understand really, Jason Fung's whole premise with that book is we have been mistreating diabetes all along. Instead of treating diabetes as just, let's lower your blood glucose. That's the thing we see.
Mm-hmm.
Really what we want to do is get your insulin down over time. And we want to, stop putting so much glucose in. And that's where the fasting comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
During the fast, we're not putting it in and we're draining it out. And so over time, that's going to heal the problems that created the type 2 diabetes in the first place.
Right. Get to the root cause of the problem rather than just treating the problem.
We see the high blood glucose. Yeah. That's how you're diagnosed. I actually read a journal article not that long ago that said, do we have it all wrong? In diagnosing diabetes and prediabetes, by looking at the A1C. And the premise of this journal article was we need to start tracking the insulin levels because they're a predictor. When your fasted insulin levels go up, blood glucose over time is also going to start to go up. But the first thing that happens is the insulin starts to go up. When you still look healthy, your insulin's doing its job. It's keeping your blood glucose steady, but insulin's going up, 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 up because you're not insulin resistant yet. But then over time, your body becomes insulin resistant and it no longer can control your blood glucose as well. And that's when we start seeing the A1Cs go up, the higher blood glucose levels. But we could have solved the problem early on if we had identified that the insulin was going up.
So it's good for people to maybe request that in the beginning to find that out. That would be great to know. I definitely think that obesity is at an all-time high. It's over 40-something% now in the US. Diabetes is an all-time high. So intermittent fasting is truly a lifesaver. It's a long game approach. And it's like you talk about, it's a mindset shift and a lifestyle change that improves every aspect of your life.
Absolutely. I would not stop. Yeah. I feel so good. And, yes, it's helping me maintain my weight loss year after year, which is amazing because I never had that before in my adult life. But also I think of all the things that it's doing for me, for my health and my longevity. And, I'm going to live a long and healthy life.
Yeah. Well, I want to recommend everybody get this book. It's awesome. This is what it looks like. Yeah. I'm going to put the link in my information because it really is just honestly, like I said before, it's more of a resource. I mean, people have all these questions and it's just excellent information to have. Where can everybody find you? I know you mentioned you have some great, huge support groups, which I think is so helpful in any process you're going through, is just having support.
Absolutely. Well, if you go to jenstevens.com, Jen is G-I-N, Stevens with a PH, I've got links there to where you can find everything that I'm doing. I've got a podcast that you can listen to, intermittent fasting stories. You can listen to real life intermittent fasters and how they found success. The intermittent fasting podcast, if you're a little more interested in the science side of things, we answer listener questions. But there's a link to the Facebook group through jenstevens.com and you can find everything that I'm doing.
Awesome. Well, last question. What is the impact you want to have on the world with your story and what your work is?
Really just the idea of hope and that we're not destined to get bigger and bigger and sicker as we get older. And, if you're facing health issues right now and you've been overweight for a long time, number one, it's not your fault. It's your body protecting you. Believe it or not, your body is trying to protect you. And all the things that it's doing is based on, the information that you thought you were supposed to be doing, what you've been told. You've probably been following the advice really well. It's just that you've had bad advice. So my life's work is to empower people and to give them hope and to help them understand that you and your body can be on the same team. And you can figure this out. And wherever you are right now in your health, you can improve it.
I love that. I love that. I love that hope because that is what people need. So thank you so much for being here. I've had a great time. I've learned so much and seriously, I'm going to link that book. I just feel like it's a huge help for anybody wanting to get started in this.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you.